deal with Netflix is officially over. We'll talk about that in just a second, because of course you and I, people have been paying attention during our many.
If you thought Meghan Markle's Netflix drama was already bad, brace yourself. It's just gone completely off the rails. What began as a glittering production deal has unraveled into what some insiders are calling one of the most chaotic breakdowns in Netflix's recent history. Forget the polished Instagram shots and carefully worded PR fluff. Behind the scenes, Meghan's been hurling verbal grenades, and the crew has finally had enough. The real explosion came during a private internal screening for With Love Meghan Season 2, and that's when everything hit boiling point.
Fascinating, because I've been saying, as ever, you can buy dried flowers, cookie mix, all that kind of stuff, runny jam, scam jam, apricot spread. I've been saying
This wasn't some casual review session. It was a big deal. Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos personally arranged the screening, pulling in not only top executives, but the full cast and crew. It was meant to be a celebration, a special first look at the opening 3 episodes. But the party mood didn't last. Multiple insiders say things stayed calm until the feedback started. Cast members, crew technicians, even editors who'd spent months on the project began calling out problems, and that's when the room's energy shifted fast.
% proof, 45% alcohol. Folks, that is fall down booze. That is strong. That is strong. But the problem with it really in terms of a business was that it's $30 a bottle. Go to your grocery store.
We're talking glaring continuity blunders, clumsy jump cuts, and even basic grammar slips in Meghan's own dialogue. The atmosphere was tense but still professional until Meghan lost her cool. Right there beside Ted Sarandos, she reportedly raised her voice for the entire room to hear. Witnesses say she accused the crew of acting like hecklers instead of professionals, claiming their opinions didn't matter, and branding the feedback as nothing more than personal attacks meant to sabotage her work. The shock was instant. This was a room full of people who'd been pulling exhausting hours to meet deadlines, but Meghan wasn't finished.
Guess if people really, really loved Meghan, they might be prepared to go to that trouble. But here's the problem. They don't really, really love Meghan, do they? Quite the reverse. So they're not bothering to go to that trouble. And as I predicted,
she launched into a full-blown tirade, telling the room that none of them would even have jobs at Netflix if it weren't for her. Meghan insisted they should be grateful, that she deserved a thank you instead of criticism. But the response? Utter silence. Not one person spoke up, not one thank you. That quiet seemed to push her over the edge. In a flash, she stormed out of the screening. No apology, no explanation, just one sharp warning thrown over her shoulder. She told them anyone who kept calling out her mistakes or giving feedback she didn't like would never make it in this industry. Those were her last words before vanishing for the day. And the fallout?
They've looked at the lackluster sales for the rest of the product, and they think there's nothing in this. And they're also rather annoyed, apparently, that Meghan is obsessed with As Ever and has been ignoring Netflix. So
what followed was pure confusion. Seasoned Netflix veterans admitted they had never witnessed anything like it. Some crew members said they felt directly threatened by her words. One or two even requested reassignment on the spot. Others were simply deflated, confessing they had once believed in Meghan's vision, but now couldn't recognize the person standing at the center of it. And then came the real bombshell. Just days later, Netflix officially axed her entire deal. No season 3, no spin-offs, no side projects, and no more Meghan Markle content. Not because the show tanked, but because her behavior had become impossible to manage.
Interpreted one of the things you just repeated from the Daily Mail differently. The idea that Netflix wasn't going to play second fiddle to Meghan, to me, I interpreted that not as Meghan being obsessed with the As Ever brand as much as
behind the scenes, Netflix bosses Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters had already made up their minds. Meghan was finished. That chaotic internal screening was simply the last straw. Insiders reveal she's been scrambling ever since, flooding Sarandos with calls, pitching a one-off special, even floating ideas for a glossy travel series in a last-ditch bid to redeem herself. But the answer is a firm, unshakable no. The door is locked, bolted, and Netflix isn't budging. Her public meltdown in front of the very crew who built her show didn't just break protocol, it crossed a line, turning the situation from merely unprofessional to deeply personal.
Or the British royal family. It's all been about stomping on other people to elevate herself. And so when I read that line, I believe it was from the Daily Mail, about how they weren't going to play second fiddle, and ultimately that's why.
And now Meghan Markle is standing somewhere she never thought she'd be. Out of deals, out of allies, and running dangerously low on options. Over at Netflix HQ, the stunned silence after her outburst didn't last long. Within hours, whispers were flying through internal emails and private group chats. People who hadn't even been in the screening room were suddenly getting the story. Editors, production assistants, marketing staff, each adding their own spin to what they'd heard. Some branded a meltdown, others a full-blown power trip. But on one point, everyone agreed the entire energy around her show had shifted, and not in her favor.
As ever, I'm not sure where that stands now. But you put me straight there. What I think they've become fed up, or what you're saying, and I agree with you, they've become fed up with her self-obsession, her own brand.
Ted Sarandos may have stayed quiet in the moment, but insiders swear his face said everything that icy, stone-cold executive stare, as if he was already drafting the final "we wish her well" statement in his head. Behind the curtain, Netflix had already sunk millions into season 2, and they knew it had to come out eventually. The real puzzle now, how to release it without sparking an even bigger PR firestorm. Whispers inside the company even hinted they briefly toyed with shelving the show entirely, swallowing the loss just to cut ties. But Meghan, she was still strutting around like the captain of a ship that was already halfway underwater.
That they don't believe, or silent stories that they are saying are incorrect, inaccurate. And they haven't done that here.
Yeah.
We haven't had Netflix swoop in and say, whoa, 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 you guys are, you guys are premature here. We haven't made any decisions, which they have in the past.
The very next day, Meghan reportedly summoned 2 of her executive producers into a closed-door meeting. Her attempt to rewrite the narrative before it spread any further. Sources say she claimed the screening had been a setup rigged to humiliate her in front of the entire team. She painted herself as the victim, accusing Netflix execs of using her as a convenient scapegoat for what she called a sloppy post-production team. Her demands? Immediate re-edits, all future screenings scrapped unless she personally signed off on them. Her producers kept quiet in the room, but the second they left, one fired off an email to Netflix brass, making it clear they wanted distance from the blow-up and labeling the situation completely untenable. That's when the unraveling truly began.
Over the last 3 days, I think speaks volumes.
It's true, Kinsey. It's 100% true. And what I always said, and I think you agree with me, Ted Sarandos, the chief executive of Netflix, big fan of Meghan, and I think his problem was this. He computed.
Soon after complaint began flooding in, not just about the screening fiasco, but about what crew members claimed had been months of tense, toxic behavior from Meghan herself. Multiple insiders described her as controlling, quick to dismiss ideas, and at times downright rude. One recalled her openly rejecting wardrobe pieces by sneering that they looked cheap in front of the entire team. Another said she flat out refused to film unless the lighting setup made her appear, in her own words, presidential. It hadn't always been like this. When the ink first dried on the Netflix deal, Meghan presented herself as polished, visionary, and hungry to create something groundbreaking. Back then, Netflix was genuinely excited.
So, and I also always said that one day, Ted Sarandos is going to have to face down his shareholders who are going to say, hang on a second, exactly how much money are you spending on this couple? Because they're not bringing home the bacon.
Well, also around the time that he signs with Harry and Meghan.
When Meghan first pitched with Love Meghan, it sounded like a dream project. Heartfelt journeys, global adventures, and in-depth conversations with inspiring women from around the world. But somewhere between concept and camera, the tone shifted. What was meant to be a cultural deep dive slowly morphed into a full-blown vanity project. Her name stamped in the title, her face dominating every shot, her voice narrating nearly every moment. The balance was gone. As the episodes became more about Meghan than the message, enthusiasm inside Netflix evaporated. Executives who had once fought for her deal quietly began ducking out of meetings. Creative consultants walked away mid-season, and even Netflix's seasoned PR pros, usually miracle workers at Spin, were left shrugging. One insider summed it up bluntly: "It's like polishing a statue that just keeps melting."
There are discussions happening, so we want to be the ones that secure this great get. Additionally, they had so much success with The Crown at that time. Unbelievable Emmy-winning success. The critics loved The Crown. Everybody's falling over themselves about this beautifully scripted television show that's not necessarily the most accurate, but it's a gorgeous TV show. They had just bought Diana.
Here's the wildest twist. Meghan still thought she could salvage it. Even after the blow-ups, she kept rolling out new pitches: a luxury shopping show, a soul-searching travel docuseries, even some strange podcast meets visual hybrid that left everyone scratching their heads. But Netflix wasn't biting. Greg Peters, the co-CEO, allegedly went so far as to have his assistants block any Meghan-related emails from hitting his inbox. Ted Sarandos was more polite, but his stance was just as final. Meghan was done. No meetings, no calls, no redemption tour. For Netflix leadership, the brand damage was already too deep, the drama too costly, and the shockwaves didn't stop there. This crash and burn began spilling into every corner of Meghan's wider empire.
Basically by Netflix saying, yeah, you know what, it's reached the end of its course, everything's fine, but we've just decided to move on. They're saying, As Ever is not that great either. I mean, that's basically what they're saying. We don't believe in As Ever. And we talked about Netflix, their concern with Meghan,
The loyal inner circle Meghan once relied on, stylists, advisors, consultants, started slipping away. At first, it was subtle: postponed meetings, unanswered texts, excuses that didn't quite add up. But soon the shift was impossible to ignore. Agencies stopped returning calls altogether. Then came the real blow: a top-tier PR firm that had guided her from the very start of her post-royal reinvention abruptly cut ties. No statement, no explanation, just gone. Inside Hollywood, whispers grew louder. Meghan wasn't being iced out for lack of talent. She was becoming a cautionary tale. A star who could burn through goodwill faster than she could build it.
It's irresponsible and it's messy, and maybe Netflix was just exhausted with chasing this person's ego.
Yeah, we'll talk about also the stunning lack of success of their programs, which must have disappointed Netflix no end. Of course, Harry's awful program.
One studio executive didn't hold back. You can be demanding, but you can't be delusional. And Meghan's out here acting like she's Oprah and Beyonce combined. The line made the rounds fast, slipping from private text threads to boardroom banter. The bizarre twist? Meghan appeared completely unfazed. Publicly, she projected confidence, gliding into a charity gala in a custom designer gown, dazzling cameras with that practiced smile, striking poses like she was still Hollywood's golden ticket. But behind the scenes, her team was in full-blown panic. The phones had gone silent. No fresh offers from studios, no nibbles from networks, not even a whisper from upstart streaming platforms desperate for marquee names. Everyone was watching Netflix, and once Netflix shut the door, the rest of the industry followed suit.
Traction about that kind of nastiness. So that sold. That series did okay. Ever since then, disastrous. Their television efforts have been disastrous. So TV.
Can I tell you what somebody close to Harry and Meghan told Page Six? I think it's very interesting. They said there's more TV projects.
She tried to pivot fast. First came the podcast pitch. Meghan floated a return to audio, promising a raw, unfiltered format. No glossy scripts, just her speaking her truth. The snag? Spotify had already walked away, and no other major platform was willing to gamble on her name. Then came the Instagram revival: fresh profile shots, cryptic captions, a flood of inspirational quotes. But the magic was gone. Engagement barely flickered, comments turned savage, and her attempt to resurrect the influencer glow fizzled in days. The rebrand didn't just stall, it flatlined.
of a business. And these two brand experts who do a podcast called The Art of the Brand. It's a Canadian lawyer called Philip Miller and a California marketing executive called Camille Moore. I mean, they haven't held back. They've said this lifestyle brand, as ever, they say, is...
Then the whispers started. Not splashy tell-alls, quiet leaks, anonymous tips, hushed phone calls to reporters. People close to Meghan claimed she was unraveling. They painted a picture of a woman glued to gossip sites at 3 a.m., frantically refreshing headlines, ringing up old colleagues in the dead of night to demand loyalty. "Why aren't you defending me online?" she'd ask, as if silence was betrayal. Her grip on the narrative was slipping, and she didn't know how to tighten it again. In a final Hail Mary, Meghan drafted a personal plea to Ted Sarandos, a one-off Netflix special, raw, intimate, redemptive. She'd co-produce, part fund, and even surrender full editorial control. Ted never answered. His assistant quietly forwarded the email straight to legal. That was the moment it sank in. There was no coming back. The doors that once swung open for Meghan were now sealed shut, and the same executives who once hailed her as a game changer were quietly making sure she stayed out. No press release, no farewell, no graceful exit, just a suffocating silence. Projects vanished from schedules, meetings evaporated without explanation, and her name, once a golden ticket, now came stamped with a warning label. In Hollywood, image is currency. Meghan's had been spent and overdrawn. She wasn't simply dropped, she was erased. Surgically, strategically, and without ceremony. All that lingers now is the echo of a squandered empire, a woman who had the world's attention, a global platform, and every chance to cement her legacy until she talked herself right out of it.